Can a Fuji GFX 100S2 100 megapixel digital camera compete with 4x5-inch black and white film on our test scene? So I'm going to take my 4x5, reset it up as soon as the sun comes back out, and I'm going to shoot the exact same scene that I shot a couple of days ago for the first video looking at this camera. And then my plan is to shoot Fomapan 100 at box speed, and I'm going to process it in Rodinal 1:50, which is one of my favorite combinations, and then scan it on the Imacon 646. The digital file that I shot a few days ago is going to be converted in Photoshop's raw editing software using Fuji's across profile that they have right there. I've shot a ton of actual across film over the years, and I'm curious to see how good this 100 megapixel file, when converted, looks, and how good does it look compared to actual black and white film. Let's get shooting. All right, so the first image we're going to look at is the Fuji GFX 100S2 converted to black and white using the across profile. And I did my best to sort of bring out what I know across looks like, and it actually looks quite good. The contrast, the tonality, the grayscale is really lovely. If we zoom into the image, it has that really wonderful micro sort of popping contrast that we like to see in the black and white image. However, the highlights do have sort of a different rendering and feeling to me. I went back into the file and I looked at that white license plate to see if there was more detail there. And it's not clipped in the file. And I have pulled it all the way down. And I have noticed that on the Fuji camera that sometimes very, very bright highlights get a little bit of a smear or a digital artifacting to it. I don't know what you want to call it, but I do see it, and I see it in this file in particular. Let's now take a look at the Fomapan 100. Now, the Fomapan 100 to me, this looks like classic black and white. It has a very different feel. I think you can feel it right off the bat. This is like the 50s and 60s, and it's the reason I chose this particular black and white film and developer combination, that being Rodinal, because it's about as classic as a formula as you're going to get. I love Fomapan 100. I love Rodinal as its combination, and I think you can see it in this file. It's expressive. The gray tonality is absolutely gorgeous. And if we zoom into the file, it just gets better. It's incredibly sharp. I shot this at f/16 at 1/8. And this absolutely just perfectly sharp. When I scanned this on the Imacon, I scanned it at 3200 DPI optical in 2 sections and stitched together in Photoshop. And I did it as a wet mount scan, which is something you can do on an Imacon. I don't do it often, but it was just going to give me the absolute best black and white scan I could get. If we zoom into that license plate that gave a problem to the Fuji camera, we can see that the Fomapan held it absolutely perfect. Now let's do some side-by-sides. So now that we're seeing the two images side by side, the Fuji's on the left, the Fomapan's on the right, you know, they're both really beautiful. They both have a really nice contrast. They both have a really nice sense of gray. However, the devil in this case is going to be in the details. So let's zoom in here and take a look at that. All right, so what you can see here is what I see a lot in digital conversions of a file to black and white. There's no question in my mind the film is like 1,000 times better than what I'm seeing out of the digital file. You know, even just the micro contrast between the two is so much better on the film file than it is on the digital file. The clarity, the edge sharpness, if you look at what's happening to the numbers where it's digital, they have a very sort of clean, slick digital feel to it. That's the only way I can describe it. Whereas the film has this beautiful, sharp, organic, analog quality. I mean, this right here, I think illustrates the biggest difference between these two materials just in this detail shot. I like the look, personally, of the film. I think it just feels so much better. In this next section here, once again, ultra zoomed in, I feel the difference immediately. The digital file while it's very sharp and very clean, lacks that micro punch and crispness that I'm seeing out of the film. If I look at the tiles on top of the roof, the film has texture. If I look at the grain of the wood, the film has texture. Yes, there is a little bit of film grain on the whites there, but guess what? It's film. There should be film grain at this high of magnification, and I think it looks lovely. The digital file is quite good, and I'm sure with a little bit of microstructure, I'm sure of some fine detail enhancements, I could bring it up. However, with the digital file, the one thing that I found is that there is a very careful line you don't want to cross, because if you do, it starts feeling very fake and very too hyper in feeling. It loses the quality of being in a photograph and becomes almost more of an illustration. So I do think you could bring this up a little more and get closer maybe to the feeling of the film, but it once again would require a fair amount of work to get to that point. I do see in the digital file, if you look at the far white bar there of the wood, there is a little more texture, a little more definition than there is in the film file. However, I don't think that is because of more resolution. I think it's because of the time of day. If you look at the shadow on the door and you look at the shadow on the other door, the digital file was shot about 45 minutes later than the film file was. I had no choice but to shoot it because we had thunderstorms coming in. And so I think that little bit of time difference is why we're not seeing that definition, but it is very impressive that both files are holding so much detail. So in this example, once again, we're looking at the micro sharpness, micro contrast, separation of tone. It's on the far side, so we're also looking at how good edge sharpness is. And I think, once again, the film has a slight edge. I don't think it's huge in this case, but I do think the film has a little more bite. Once again, I'm sure you could tweak the digital file to get there. I also like the separation of gray tonality a little better in the film, but once again, it was 45 minutes later in the day, so it's hard to be 100% quantifying this, but to me, the film just has a better feeling in the black and white. So for the next 15 seconds, I'm just going to leave the Fuji GFX 100S2, they have to come up with a shorter name for the love of God, image up on the screen so you can just look at it and take in the overall information. Now let's take a look at the Fomapan 100, once again processed Rodinal 1:50 4x5, and just take in the overall information and how you feel the image feels as well. Now let's move on to the conclusion. So which image did you prefer? I preferred the black and white, the actual film. I think that the film just had a better feeling to it, better sharpness to it, better highlight, the shadow control, just everything about it felt better. And also one thing that a lot of people have mentioned that I'm very aware of and I think about it in my own work is just the overall feeling. It isn't just about maximum resolution, maximum sharpness, but the feeling to me of the black and white film just felt better than the Fuji converted to black and white. Another question a lot of people asked is cost. What is this kind of system going to cost? Well, the reality is the Fuji system isn't as expensive as systems like this some years ago were, and it's about $5,000 for the body. Now, that's a lot of money, but if you're someone who shoots a lot of film, that will pay itself back very quickly. Additionally, because it's a mirrorless system, you can put a lot of lenses you probably already own on this camera. However, it's important to understand that if you really want to maximize what a 100 megapixel sensor can do, and you're looking for the ultimate in clarity, you do need to use very good glass. As I said in my first video, I do recommend this camera without reservation for color work. It's nice for black and white work, but for me, I would absolutely stick to black and white film. Additionally, I still like the look of the color better on film than with this camera, but this camera is quite good. Thank you very much for listening. I can't wait to hear your thoughts. Now go shoot some film.